Good evening, I'm Faye Kwan. Here are the top stories for tonight. Hamas hands over more hostage bodies as ceasefire tensions rise, and Donald Trump warns Hamas to disarm or face force as world leaders call for accountability over Gaza. That and more coming up on AWANI International. Hamas has handed over 8 remains of deceased Israeli hostages to Israel on Tuesday, signaling progress of the fragile ceasefire deal brokered by U.S. President Donald Trump. The move comes amid rising tensions as Israel threatens to cut half of humanitarian aid to Gaza and Hamas fighters reassert control on the ground. The first 4 remains were transferred from Gaza to Israel on late Tuesday night and were taken for forensic identification. However, Hamas has yet to deliver remains for at least 19 more hostages believed dead. Israel responded to the delay by reducing the number of humanitarian aid trucks entering Gaza by half, from the expected 600 to around 300 daily. The ceasefire deal announced last week led to the release of 20 living hostages in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned Hamas to disarm or face force. While not specifying a deadline, he says any use of force could be quick and potentially violent.
On Gaza, how long will it take Hamas to disarm, and can you guarantee that is going to happen?
Well, they're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them.
Trump said he communicated the order to Hamas through intermediaries based on his 20-point peace proposal. But the outlook for that plan has dimmed since his return from Israel and Egypt earlier this week. Hamas previously said it will not disarm unless a Palestinian state is established. Meanwhile, Israel continues to restrict aid to Gaza, saying it will not open the Rafah crossing today after Hamas failed to return the bodies of all hostages killed during the October 7th attack. Of the 28 dead hostages, only 8 have been returned so far. Al Jazeera has also reported of Israeli tanks firing at Palestinians in the city of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza.
Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim and British MP Jeremy Corbyn are calling for justice and accountability in Gaza, warning that the current ceasefire is fragile and far from a real solution. Speaking at the Kuala Lumpur Conference on a Just and Humane International Order, Anwar said the ceasefire offers little security or dignity for Palestinians, stressing the need to rebuild Gaza and recognize their right to live freely on their land.
Now, with the latest fragile ceasefire in place in Sharm el-Sheikh, we are monitoring by the minute, there is a glimpse, faint but real, of peace. There's no plan for comprehensive peace, no guarantee of return to the Palestinians, and no clear categorical statement to guarantee the formation of an independent state of Palestine. We welcome, of course, the initiative, even if by President Donald Trump. But we must be honest enough to state that we do not want another pause between wars. So we're dealing with Netanyahu and his cabinet, who made no pretensions. They're not going to honor that. So the ceasefire, as far as we are concerned, must be a doorway to rebuilding Gaza, to restoring dignity, and to recognizing the Palestinian right to live freely in their own land.
Anwar also joined delegates from across Asia, Africa, and Latin America in urging for a stronger South-South cooperation.
Nations of the global South are rediscovering their voice. And this is something very reassuring. And it's supported by many young students and youth and general public from the north. And again, I see these contradictions. We were struggling and demonized or arrested under the International Security Act, we thought it just happening this Asia, Africa, Latin America. But now, fortunately, Malaysia is much freer for students to demonstrate and say their piece than those in the UK and the United States.
British MP Jeremy Corbyn echoed Anwar's remarks, saying the Global South is going through a reawakening, while more people in the West are pushing back against systems that no longer represent them.
Prime Minister Anwar's call for a new order from the South speaks directly and powerfully to this reawakening. It's not a nostalgia for the past. It is a renewal of its promise to build a world where every nation and every person can live in dignity, free from domination. At the same time, and this is an interesting phenomenon, the same extraordinary thing is happening in the northern countries. People are rising against a system that does not represent them. In Italy, workers have gone on general strike for Palestine, refusing to be complicit in the genocide. In my own country, in Britain, hundreds of thousands have marched throughout London and every other city for peace, week in, week out, despite vilification from the last two governments. And now we have the absurdity of 1,500 people arrested on terrorism charges, many of them pensioners and people with disabilities, for simply holding signs up with 7 words on them saying, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine action."
We'll be back with more after the break. Stay tuned.
Buli di sekolah. Isu ini bukan perkara baru. Buli tertakluk kepada perbuatan agresif secara fizikal.
Apa sebenarnya Jerabu punca utama yang menyumbang kepada masalah ini serta kesannya kepada kesihatan kita?
Mereka akan mengalami iritasi-iritasi kepada mata. Selain itu, iritasi kepada saluran pernafasan.
Welcome back. Russia is pushing back against US President Donald Trump's warning that its economy is on the verge of collapse. The Kremlin insists that domestic market supplies remain stable, dismissing Trump's claim of long lines for gasoline in some regions. Trump had expressed disappointment with President Vladimir Putin, accusing him of being unwilling to end the war in Ukraine and warning of severe economic consequences if the conflict continues. This isn't the first time Trump has suggested that Russia's economy is in deep trouble. With the war now in its 3rd year, Moscow continues to face heavy wartime expenses and global sanctions targeting major banks, energy exports, and strategic industries. While the wartime economy has boosted production and kept unemployment at record lows, official forecasts for 2025 GDP growth have been sharply downgraded to around 1%, compared to 4.3% in 2024 and 4.1% the year before. Inflation also remains high at about 8% as of August, double the central bank's target. Still, Moscow maintains that the slowdown is deliberate, aimed at preventing economic imbalances and insisting that Russia has successfully adapted to some of the harshest sanctions. The European Union is pressing ahead with plans for a drone wall to protect member states from aerial incursions. NATO Chief Mark Rutte says on Wednesday that the project is a joint effort, with NATO providing military capabilities while the EU uses its internal market and funding tools to support it. The initiative comes amid rising hybrid threats following multiple drone incidents near NATO's eastern flank.
Britain's Defence Secretary John Healey announced that UK fighter jets will continue patrols over Poland until the end of the year. Some 20 Russian drones entered Polish airspace last month. EU Defence Commissioner Andreas Kubilius, who is leading the effort, said the bloc's capability is limited, needing to rely heavily on Ukraine's expertise in countering Russian drone attacks. The European Commission is also trying to broaden support among southern and western EU members, who argue the project should cover the entire continent, not just the eastern flank. Diplomats say the initiative is caught up in a power struggle over who should oversee major defense projects, with Germany and France reluctant to cede control to Brussels. Analysts note the drone wall will test Europe's ability to take greater responsibility for its own defense, a goal long advocated by US President Donald Trump.
Most countries' decisions not to retaliate against US President Donald Trump's tariffs is helping to bolster the global economy. Kristalina Georgieva, managing director of the International Monetary Fund, says global growth is also supported by a lower than expected effective US tariff rate.
Yesterday, the IMF raised its 2025 global GDP growth forecast to 3.2%, up from 3% in July. But it warned that a renewed US-China trade war could still slow growth significantly. Georgieva said the tariffs announced by Trump in April were initially calculated to average 23%, although trade deals with the European Union, Japan, and other major partners have reduced that effective rate to about 17.5%. After accounting for exceptions to keep the economy functioning smoothly, the IMF estimates the rate being collected is between 9 and 10%, less than half the original expectation. Other factors supporting the global economy include stronger private sector policies, more efficient resource use, and companies quickly adapting supply chains to minimize tariff impacts.
Apple Chief Executive Tim Cook has pledged to boost investment and deepen cooperation in China, even as the tech giant seeks to reduce its reliance on the country's supply chains. The announcement came during Cook's meeting with China's industry minister amid rising tensions between Washington and Beijing.
Apple is seeking to offset the impact of US tariffs on Chinese and Indian-made products by boosting domestic investment. It is also planning to invest $600 billion in the US over the next 4 years to strengthen its supply chain resilience. China's industry ministry said Apple will increase its investment in China and step up cooperation with domestic industries, while promising a supportive business environment for foreign firms. Apple did not provide details on how much of its new capital will flow into China, but Cook's visit signals the company's continued focus on its largest international market and a key production base.
Meanwhile, Myanmar's junta chief has admitted that the military-led government cannot hold elections nationwide as the civil war sparked by the 2021 coup drags on. The comments by General Min Aung Hlaing mark his first acknowledgement that the polls will not be fully inclusive, coming just days before the 47th ASEAN summit.
Critics and Western governments have dismissed the planned vote, Myanmar's first since the coup, as an attempt to legitimize military rule through proxy parties. Many opposition groups have been banned or are boycotting the polls. A December census by the junta revealed voter registration in only 145 of the nation's 330 townships, with Myanmar's population estimated at 51.3 million. Strict eligibility rules also require parties to have at least 50,000 members and funds of about $47,000, leaving only 6 parties qualified to contest nationwide. The junta has invited ASEAN to send election observers for the polls, expected to begin on December 28th, a proposal the bloc will likely discuss at its upcoming summit.
That report wraps up AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the rivalries, strategies, and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more updates, visit international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.